My name is Mansur. It's always a pleasure being here. I'm a Druze, I'm an Israeli. I was a former IDF officer. Part of what I'm doing is, telling the real story about what it is to be an Israeli, what it is to be an Arab growing up in Israel, with your best friends being Jews and Christians and Muslims in Israel, and trying to teach the world, give them some tools to better fight anti-Semitism and the lies that mainstream media is also rolling. And lately, unfortunately, just like you said, started speaking a lot on behalf of my people, the Druze, who are being exterminated in Syria as we speak, but the world seems to not care. No Jews, no news. I would explain by starting from the beginning. There is an attempt to exterminate minorities in the Middle East. And that attempt has been done by Muslims, and they're trying, not all, but it's done by Muslims, trying to exterminate the Christians, the Yazidis, the Alawites, the Druze, the Jews, the Armenians, and the Kurds, and just basically every group in the Middle East that is not Muslim, the Muslims are trying to exterminate, either by colonizing the area and killing them, or making them run away from the places. The only group that they're unable to exterminate is the Jews. They're the only ones that know how to fight back. And what happened is when they suddenly meet a force that is stronger than them, smarter than them, and start fighting back, then they roll back and start playing the victim. And then the mainstream media, for some bizarre reason, have jumped in to become completely their PR agent. That's why they say no Jews, no news, but it's actually bigger. It's not no Jews, no news. It's no anything that makes Islam bad, no news. If anything makes Islam look good and the enemies of Islam look bad, which in that case is Jews, tomorrow is Christians, depends where we are, then all the news will talk about it. So there is a serious attempt by mainstream media, who became a full-on, undisputed, undoubted, active agent of PR for the radical Muslims while they're trying to exterminate minorities in the Middle East. This is non-negotiable. You can't really argue about that. You need just to go and hear them. So someone who really want to know the truth and who never heard about the Druze will have to go through, probably filter through 10 articles until he might reach a reasonable source that will actually tell him the truth. Most people stop at 1 or 2 or 3. First report, second report, these Druze are monsters. They're just like the Jews are monsters, because he doesn't have the time to go through it. And that's a big problem, that it's very hard for people to reach today to the source and actually see what's happening, because they're going to have to filter, and they have no idea how to filter through it. Because you've been in the region, the struggle, you've been studying it. So for you, okay, that sounds fishy, it doesn't fit, that doesn't make sense. Jaramana is basically a neighborhood outside of Damascus, but it was a very Druze neighborhood. It's like a mini town, and mostly Druze lived there. There was about 250, 200,000 Jews. During the Assad regime, when he was killing his own people, many of the Muslims fled into Jaramana, because Jaramana was too close to Damascus, and Assad didn't want to start, fighting with them right now while he's trying to kill his entire nation. So he probably thought, I'll keep them to the end. So about 1.5 million Muslims went into Jaramana to hide among the Druze. And they were living there under a Druze municipality. The leadership was Druze, and etc., all the businesses. And then what happened is, slowly, they took over the place and they started slaughtering the Druze. Now, it's very sad to say it, but it's something that we're seeing quite often whenever Islam comes to a place and start becoming a majority. They came, first of all, seeking their help. Then they became a majority. They start taking and changing, and now they're coming and demanding to enslave the Druze, because they are considered Class C, Z, citizens. Same thing that we want to do with the Christians and the Jews. And it's literally in the Quran. Actually, the Druze is even worse, because if they look further, the Druze are considered completely kuffar, and they should be killed, because they left Islam, and no one is allowed to leave Islam. The Jews and the Christians didn't really leave Islam. They were before Islam, so somehow they have some status of the people of the book, and they can stay, but under very severe conditions. Now, mind you, there's about a little bit more than 1 million Druze on planet Earth. We are one of the smallest religions to walk this earth. There is some cities that are bigger than the entire community of Druze worldwide. And these are not even big cities. They're like, kind of average cities in some countries. Majority of the Druze live in Syria, and then Lebanon, and then Israel, and then scattered around the world, Venezuela, Germany, and other places in Europe, in the US, Canada. Now, the majority of the Druze right now are under a serious extermination attempt by Muslims. Again, trying to kill them simply for being Druze. They killed their men simply for being Druze. They're raping their women just because they're Druze. We just had a case of an 81 years old Druze woman who was raped, a religious woman. So you can understand that they're not just raping them because they're young and fertile and attractive, but because it's a way to humiliate. They're using sex as weapons of war. And they've done that on October 7. So they're raping young daughters all the way to older women just because they're Druze. They're shaving their mustaches and humiliating the religious leaders, which the mustache is a very identifying symbol of the Druze, kind of like the peot that the Jewish people have, or we've seen images in the Holocaust where they shave the beard of rabbis and then shoot them in the back of the head just after they humiliated them. So we're seeing the same thing happen, and they're doing that just because they're Druze. The same thing they're doing, they're bombing Christian churches just because they're Christians. They're torturing Christian people just because they're Christians. They're killing Alawites just because they're Alawites. So you have a definition of ethnic cleansing happening in that country, sponsored by the government. Yeah. Undoubtedly. They're not hiding it. But the world remains silent. When the Muslims came to kill all the Jews, and the Jews fought them back in 48 and defeated them, and many of them who ran out of the land asked to come back, and the Jews told them, no, you're not coming back. You're literally trying to kill us. You went away, stay there. You were literally trying to genocide us. We just experienced the Holocaust. We're not letting that happen again. Never again is never again. No Nazi, Muslim Nazi is going to live around us. We're not letting you come here. You want to exterminate us. So it took them several years. Years later, they said, okay, listen, we tried to defeat them several more times. It didn't work. And what we can do is let's create the fiction of al-Nakba and blame it all on the Jews and paint the Jews as white colonizers and as the one who came to kick the indigenous people, and etc. And that fiction later on became very, very strong, leading all the universities, academia, and campuses to really believe that Israel was the cause for all the problems in the Middle East, and the Muslims were sitting here peacefully, and then the bad white Jewish colonizers came and tried to kill them all. While the real story is complete opposite. In Syria, they're trying to create the Nakba narrative while the massacres are happening. So while you have tanks and artillery and jihadists inside Syrian villages, they burned 9, killed, destroyed 10 Druze villages, if not even more, raping their women, shaving the mustaches of their men, killing their children, walking with beheaded videos and filming. You'll see a cinema crew, news crew standing there, and in front of him there's the beheading and the killing and the tanks, and he holds the camera and he says, we are here to defend the Bedouins behind us that the Druze are trying to exterminate. The Druze came to kill them and kick them out of their land, and we're here to stop them. Now they're standing inside of a Druze village with Druze blood running between their legs that they just massacred, and not even waiting 10 years or 20 years to create the false narrative of Nakba again. So they've even upgraded the victimhood game of radical Islam to that level that they play the victim while they're killing you. With Hamas, they started playing the victim 2 weeks after. Now, why does that work? Because they know that mainstream media got their back. No one is born anti-Semitic. No one is born pro-jihadist. I can promise you that. People, they're little kids, they don't want to go and drink Jewish blood, and they don't want to kill Jewish people, and they don't justify the raping of Jewish women, meanwhile pretending to be feminist. No one is born that way. But deep brainwashing and infusing of hatred alongside with morally bankrupting a society gives you that. And we're seeing that very strong in Canada and other places, usually in comfortable countries that are a bit bored. It's very easy to make, the young ones to start follow all kind of weird lies. So if we were able one day to actually start holding accountable the education system, promoting anti-Semitism and racism, the academia, the mainstream media, because everything that they're doing is criminal when you think about it. So I think the
Yeah.
only way we can start solving is by trying to push as hard as we can against the root of the problem, and hopefully from there the branches will start withering because they'll stop getting supported and educated and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and funded. Because what we're doing right now, we're trying to address it. Oh, he's super racist, let's cancel him. He is super racist, let's tackle him.
Yeah.
And it's important to stop them because they're like literally the end user of that anti-Semitic system. They're the end user of it. But we need to get back to the core, where does it start, and try to tackle it there. And it needs to come from a government, it needs to come from law, it needs to come from the education system, from the moral, from the religion, from the authority that we have in our societies to start pushing against that. And if it doesn't, we're lost. The Yazidis are being kidnapped, their girls are becoming sex slaves, the Christians are being, churches are being bombed, killed in Sudan, in Syria, in many places in the area by Muslims. They're coming trying to kill the Jews over and over again. And right now, they basically decided to break some kind of a silent agreement that lasted for 500 years between the Muslims and the Druze in Syria. The Muslims have decided to ignore the fact that the Druze are considered as kuffar, infidels in their eyes. And they all said, let's pretend that you're all Muslims. And the Druze said, okay, because mind you, the only place in the Middle East that Druze are actually free to practice their religion and pridefully so go around and share their faith and tell about it and share the beauty of their culture is in Israel. In many places, including Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, they often need to pretend that they're Muslims just so they're not being killed. And then they're faced with a lot of, very challenging and teasing questions. The authorities will come and say, we'll turn a blind eye. We don't want to start fighting with these guys. They've been fighting here for 1,000 years. They know how to fight, and they usually don't surrender. So that's easy to just let them pretend that they're Muslims. We're fine with that. But then the people many times will come and try to tease them. Yeah, if you're Muslim, let me marry your daughter. Let me take your daughter. And then the Druze will have to back up, and you say, no, we're sorry. Ah, what do you mean? You just marry inside. And it created a lot of antagonism against the Druze, which kind of reminds us of the Jews, by the way. A lot of the anti-Semitism, not all, came because the Jews simply just wanted to live by themselves, by their own rules, by their own faith, and to be allowed to practice their faith as they see it, as it was given to them by their fathers and the grandfathers and the grandfathers, and ancestors back from the book of the Bible. So in Islam, for the last 500 years, there have been skirmishes against the Druze, but give or take, the Druze managed to usually politically find some kind of a solution. And also, they were involved many times by being very successful in what they did. For example, people don't know, but it was Druze who built the first army of Jordan. It was a Druze who was a high prime minister and the right hand of the first king of Jordan. It was the Druze that helped defeat the French who were in Syria when the French, mandate was here and they were doing terrible things to the people in the land. The Druze were one of the main forces to push them out. And during the Assad regime, it was the Druze who actually provided shelter to many, many Syrians. Now, under Assad, all people in Syria suffered equally bad. He was just equally evil to everyone, but he was secular, not like Jawlani, which is, as bad, only religious. That makes it even worse. Syria is not Muslim. Syria was a Christian nation. It was a Christian area. Before that, it's literally Muslim occupation that went and conquered that area and then forced Sharia law on it. But I'm not saying, okay, all the Muslims. They have their center there. Let them play jihad in the center. But you have Christians still there. They used to be Jews. They all got out of there. You still have Christians, Druze, Alawites,
Zoroastrian.
Yazidis, and other groups there. Let them have their own land in safety. And the only one right now that's showing any interest of protecting these minorities is Israel. Why is Europe not caring about minorities? They seem to always pride themselves that they care. Why? They're literally there. Help them receive some independence. So to ask you a question, definitely, if they would leave one day, that will be a big betrayal. And we've seen similar things that happened in Lebanon, by the way. When Israel left, they left many of the Tzadalnikim to be slaughtered and killed. And I think Israel is starting to behave right now like a regional power. And one of the things that you want to do is be loyal to your allies and dictate the tone of this is how the Middle East is going to be right now, guys. We're not playing games. We're not holding our punches anymore. Gloves are off. October 7, we saw what happened. We're not going to let you do what you want to do. We're the bosses here, and that's good. Imagine if America wasn't, let's say, the boss of the free world. Then we'd be living right now under Russia or China or maybe even Nazi Germany. So it's good to have a strong moral country that is kind of dictating the rules here. Play by these rules, Western standards, democracy, freedom. You don't want to be democracy? No problem. Do your own thing. But don't go and kill others and force Sharia law. The reason that Druze are being massacred in Syria is because they're refusing to bend the knee to Sharia law. That's like how simple it is. And where did they go? To the villages that are under IDF occupation. So they knew when the massacre started, what's the safest place to go? Go to the Jews. Go to Israel. They'll save you. Israel have a strategic advantage of holding that area, and also it's the only chance for people there to live peacefully. There was a girl who was shot in the house after her entire family got killed in the head. I think it was 10 years old girl. We saw this picture. Her face is deformed, but it's still alive. She survived. She just received medical treatment in Israel. She is right now in Israel being received medical treatment. So they're saving people in Syria. Now, if Israel would do the same mistake of leaving Syria, they will go and massacre and slaughter anyone that is under that areas. If the Druze are the ones that are attacking the Bedouins, then how come there's government tanks and soldiers and Al-Qaeda and ISIS inside Druze villages raping and killing their women, shaving the beards of their leaders, and beheading their children? Well, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
If that's the case, they would be fighting in the Bedouins' towns to push the Druze back. But there's no pushing the Druze back. They literally invaded the Druze towns, started killing them, and then blamed them that they invaded. Now, the another thing is, the Druze are about 3%, I think, I might be wrong with the exact number, of Syria. They're a minority in Syria, peaceful minority, that have their women killed, their daughters kidnapped, raped, and are being right now under the threat of a genocide. Literally, Bedouin jihadists came from all over the region, including Chechnya and etc., Muslim jihadists, to come and slaughter the Druze. So that claim that the Druze are trying to exterminate the Bedouins there, and that's what they're doing, is so far-fetched that it's unbelievable. The problem is that anyone that is looking to see the truth, and you've seen it by your eyes, he will open the TV, let's hear about the Druze or Israel, and immediately he will see Israel bombed Syria. Why is no one addressing that there is famine, real starvation in Yemen, in Sudan, in many other countries around the world? Real starvation, not a single word. There's hungry people in Gaza that haven't received food because the UN is blocking it, and because Hamas is kidnapping it, everybody jumps on it. All Western media jumps on it. It's literally all over. There is real starvation right now happening to the Druze, as we're speaking, in Sweden, by the way. They don't have food. They don't have water. Their flour factory was destroyed by these jihadists. Their water wells was poisoned by the government and the jihadists and the Bedouin tribes around them. And they're standing right now in lines for 6-7 hours to go and get a little bit bowl of flour so they can go and feed their children with bread. No one is talking about that. No one is talking. And in Syria, they don't have Israel to come and send them humanitarian aid. The government is not doing anything. The government is the one starving them. Western media is not talking. So how come jihadists can always count on Western media to cover for them and be their PR agent? Because they're quite bad in doing PR. A guy with a jihadist beard standing with an AK-47 and holding a beheaded head of a child that he just murdered right after he raped his sister is not very good at PR. But Western media is pretty good. Oh, it's because of Israel. Oh, Jolani is a moderate. He can control them. But wait, Jolani sent them, guys. It's his soldiers. Oh, it's the colonization. Oh, it's the white people's fault. Let's call it as it is. Like I said, there's a real attempt to exterminate minorities in the Middle East, and it's all happening under Islam. And the only one that is defending these minorities, mind you, is Israel. Israel, Christians and Muslims and Druze and gay people and straight people and atheists and Hindu and every religion are safe in Israel, the only place. Why? Because Israel is strong enough and is stronger than the Muslims and is able to defend. Now, what happens is when you defeat Muslims that are coming to murder you, mainstream media will paint you as a genocidal state, as an apartheid state, which is the exactly complete opposite. But that just shows you how wrong things are right now with world leaders and mainstream media. And many people can go to different ways. Why is it happening? Undoubtedly, a lot of Arab money is involved, and that definitely help. But also, there's a big correlation between the red and the green. People talk about the communism and jihad. How come they always come together as best friends until they win, and then they start killing one another? But again, if people wonder sometimes, why are pro-Palestinians using the symbol of watermelons? Watermelons is not anything that represent Gaza. I've
Yeah.
been there many times. It's not like Gaza is known for their watermelons worldwide. It's just one of the yummy fruits that you might have in the land of Israel, but have nothing to do. But the symbol of watermelon, look at the colors, red and the green, from the beginning, because they know that the only way that democracy, Western civilization, can be defeated is if jihad and communism come together. Communism have the propaganda, the brain, the money, and jihad have the numbers and the radicalization and also the money, and they come together and they might be able to defeat the West. So back to Syria, there's a real attempt to genocide the Druze by the government. Now, the government is not even hiding it. Only one that is hiding it is Western politicians and Western media, because they're trying to be the PR agent for an ISIS Al-Qaeda terrorist, Jawlani and his people. Now, here's the thing. If I would have told you right after 9/11, there will come a terrorist that was a commander in ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and then started his own terrorist organization. And then all of his soldiers have ISIS patches and Al-Qaeda patches. And then they will be going in the streets, beheading people, filming, chanting Allahu Akbar, raping, saying that they want to destroy America and the West. And I would have told you right after 9/11, and you know what? Let me tell you something. American leaders will go out of their way to cover for them. Europe will call and shake their hands, and Macron will go and do cocaine with them, I don't know what, and shake their hands. You will tell me you lost your mind. There's no way that the West will go and side with their enemies and become the PR agent. But it's happening right now. Like, there's no
Yeah.
denying it.
Yeah.
They've killed thousands of Alawites. They're killing hundreds of Christians, if not even more. They're trying to annihilate the Druze. They've killed, the last numbers that we heard, and it's hard to count the numbers, are about more than 2,000 are dead. About 200 women and children got kidnapped. Probably will never see them again. Most likely they'll become sex slaves or be sold to sex trafficking around the world. There is about 100,000 households and buildings completely destroyed, and businesses. The damage is standing on several $1 million of damage. Now, let me remind you, a monthly salary lately in the Mount of Sweda and in Syria is about $20. For them, it's impossible to recover from the damage that was done. And that's what happened, ladies and gentlemen, whenever Islam is left free to go and roam and come and visit your areas. They come, they burn, they loot, they destroy, and they move on. Whenever they become a majority, unless rare occasions where, for some reason, the government is extremely strong and they're able to enforce moderate Sharia law, then these places become safe. But we have very, very rare examples of that happening in Dubai. Amazing. People are talking that it's even safer than Europe and the West and Israel. People go there, visit there, are always amazed, and etc. But that's unfortunately, sad to say, it's a rare example right now, because the mainstream media and the radical Muslim world have kidnapped the identity of Islam, and they're driving it down to the shithole, forgive my French, of sending them back in the future to the medieval days, rather than doubling down on the good ones that actually have a future and can lead that world into a better place. We're not seeing that. Syria, for those who don't know, is choosing to go in the Muslim Salafi path. For those who don't know, the Salafis are the people in Islam that choose to take everything possible to the extreme as it can get inside the boundaries of the Quran. And that leaves you a lot of place to go extreme. And they take that in many, many aspects. An example that I use often is, look at Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, the Salafis took over the country, and now what they do, Taliban and their friends, and now what they're doing is they're coming and saying this: women are not allowed to show their hair. And then right after comes another fatwa: women are not allowed to show their face. And then again, women are not allowed to show their eyes even. And then again, women are actually not allowed to speak, because just the voice of a woman might tempt a good Muslim man to sin. And then someone comes and says, I can take it more extreme even. Let me show you. Hold my camel milk, hold my goat milk, and let me show you how extreme I can take it. Women are not even allowed to go out of the house because just the smell of a woman might tempt a good Muslim man. And they're all saying, oh, good job, Aziz, good job, here you go. Cheers with another glass of, camel milk. And then someone else, I can make it even more extreme. Women are not, daughters are not even allowed to go to school. Why should a Muslim girl go to school? If her job is only to marry at the age of 6, to start having sex at the age of 8 or 9, and to bring children, and for the man to groom her to become the perfect sex slave and the perfect household slave for him. That's why they take them from a young age. So why should we send her to school? What benefit does it have? And then, oh, good job, Aziz, and they all jump on that. So that shows you any country that becomes Salafi, and that's just one example of how Sharia law is implanted. The plantment of Sharia law is done only with the aspect of women. Now, this comes also in the aspect of economy, of military, of jihad, of how to treat minorities, and etc. And in Syria, we're seeing right now the attempt to implement Salafi Sharia law on minorities. Quran says that only Muslims are allowed to carry weapons. Jews, Christians are not allowed to carry a sword. They're not allowed to ride a horse. They're not allowed to be higher than a Muslim. They're not allowed to build a house bigger than the Muslims' house. They're not allowed to build a new church and a new synagogue, and etc. And they need to pay a lot of taxes. So the first thing, they took the country. See, what's the first thing they did? They took the country by the help of Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Hamas and other, pro-Palestine radical jihadists. First thing that they do is not, let's build a better economy. Let's build a better cabinet in that government that give representation to all the people of Syria. First thing that they do, Christians and Druze, give us your weapons. Christians and Druze. Christians, by the way, they've submitted much faster because they're not as united and they're closer. They don't have really a lot of place to defend themselves. The Druze came and said, sorry, aren't you the guy who sieged us last month or was trying to kill us and kidnap our women? Like literally, you came with ISIS and then you went back, came with Al-Qaeda, then you went back and you came with Al-Nusra. I mean, you've literally been trying to kill us. That's as if Hamas takes control of the government of Israel, and the first order they make, all the Jews surrender your weapon. And if not, you're going to be categorized as terrorist. And the same, some Christians came and said that. And then they said, okay, if you don't do that, we're going to come and kill you. And that's how this war started. They started sending their tanks and their artillery and their military drones. And Israel stepped in. First day of the war. Jawlani, if you send your guys, we're going to take them down. Jawlani said, watch me. He sent his tanks. Israel went, bam, 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 took some of his tanks. Jawlani's like, they're bluffing. America just said that they want to normalize relationship with that. America is not going to let them stop us from genociding the Druze. This is exactly how it's happening, guys. I'm running you through it from a more clear glasses to see how it went. So he saw America normalize relations. They're talking about right now, Donald Trump shook hands with Jawlani, an ISIS terrorist, and he called him a tough guy, impressive guy, and they're trying to rebrand him. So they say, Israel won't dare to come and stop us because they'll be declaring war, so we have a green light to go and exterminate minorities. They keep going down with tanks and artillery and Bedouin tribes, and Israel goes and shoots the Pentagon of Syria. Literally, the Ministry of Defense behind, you saw this video with the reporter, boom, goes up. That is the Pentagon of Syria. Jawlani realized that Israel is serious, and what he does, he runs to Turkey. And then starts the most shameful thing that we saw the West do. In Turkey, with the help of Saudi Arabia, they start pressuring the Americans to tell Israel to stop its aggression towards the Syrian people. It's just making things worse. America, who's lately shifted from being Democrats who are owned and controlled, basically, almost to say, or heavily infiltrated by Shia money, have moved to become very, very suspiciously infiltrated by Sunni money. Saudi Arabia, give them $100 billion. Qatar, suddenly a great friend. When did Qatar become a great friend of America? They're literally the sponsors of terrorism for death to America all along. There are people, the Hamas and the proxies have literally kidnapped and killed Americans, but suddenly they became good friends because they paid a lot of money. So now the American administration is getting, and I'm not saying that it fell to the dark side, but they're getting their advice about how to handle the Middle East not anymore from Israel. They're seeing the picture painted by Saudi Arabia, which is Sunnah. Now let me show you how that connects. Saudi Arabia is Sunnah, Turkey is Sunnah, Al-Shah, Al-Shara, Jawlani, the jihadists in Syria are all Sunnah. So in one way, they want to control that narrative and be the one that controls Syria and lead the world. And they decided Jawlani can be our puppet. But we have to rebrand his image. How are we going to do this? With a lot of money and pressure on America to hold Israel from keep killing terrorists, because then we can make a terrorist maybe look. But then the Druze became a little bit of a pain in their neck, you know, bone in their neck, because Jawlani is trying to kill the Druze, and if Israel is going to save the Druze, it's going to make Jawlani look really bad. The Druze are probably one of the best citizens any country can have or import. Let's say now Europe, they need people to come and help them. Let's say now Europe start bringing Muslims, start bringing Druze. This is what's going to happen. Zero suicide attacking, zero car ramming into Christmas markets, zero grooming and gang raping, zero going around and stabbing little babies in parks like they're doing, zero Allahu Akbar jihad, and very loyal, very hardworking, kind, and morally strong citizens. So the West have options. Start bringing Druze to come and work with you. Start bringing Christians from the Middle East to come and work with you. Life will be good. Stop bringing Muslims to come and work with you. Many people will hate hearing that. Well, that's their problem. I'm talking right now by facts on the ground. Maybe there is, and there is, very kind Muslims that come. But the problem is that with one of them that comes, 9 comes, and they're extremely jihadist, or one day they will jump on the jihad train. The great example is Turkish migrant who came to Europe. They had already 3-4 generations to settle in. You know what's happening right now with the Druze in Germany and in Europe? Many pro-Palestine, many Turkish, and many Syrian Muslims are walking in the streets, holding flags of, anti-Israel and all these things, with scissors, saying we want to go and find the Druze and cut their mustaches and humiliate them. Meanwhile, holding pictures of Al-Jawlani. Turkish people, 3rd, 4th generation in Europe. Jawlani is an ISIS terrorist who just went on slaughtering. So it shows you that even after several generations in your country, the first chance they have to jump bed with radical jihad, they do that. So that is a problem. The Druze won't do that, the Christians won't do that, and etc. The problem is if they have a hidden agenda still to try to convert you, it's never going to work. One day it's going to explode. Good example, the Jews today have no desire to convert Christians or Druze or anyone. Druze as well. And I would say most of Christian nations today have abandoned that idea of let's force the world to become Christian. They don't care. If you want to live in India the way your life, you want to live in China how you want to live in Africa, you want to live in... It's actually cool because then we can go and visit different places. So the West have abandoned the desire to convert. And now you don't need to go to sleep, Denmark doesn't need to go to sleep thinking maybe Switzerland will invade us tomorrow and force us eat their bread and adapt their way of life. They don't. So in Europe and in many places in the West, they literally abandoned the desire or the need to be afraid of their neighbors that will come and kill them if they're not strong enough. With the Arab world today, that doesn't exist yet. The only reason they're not conquering America or Israel or Europe because they're not strong enough to do it. So if they hold a little bit that desire to convert you, you'll never be able to have peace with them. But if they will abandon that idea and says, let's live aside you, then you definitely, because in the end, it's just humans, just like me and you. Only difference is you don't want to conquer them and make them, force them to have your faith. They want to conquer you and force you to have their faith. And they don't do it because they're stronger enough, so they offer peace with you now. Here's the biggest, paradox. They started, like you said, in Egypt and in the Arab Peninsula, and then they realized how devastating and dangerous they were to their own. So they got kicked out of there and declared as terrorist organizations. Banned, not allowed. So then they went and they got welcomed in Europe under the premise of freedom of speech and to respect minorities. So they started practicing pro-radical jihad, Salafi, pro-Palestine terrorist ideology. Literally, they celebrated October 7. They're celebrating right now the massacre of the Druze by holding posters of Jawlani. They see Sinwar as a hero. They love Hitler. That's the biggest Muslim community or, club, call it, that they admire Hitler. And they've been banned out of most Arab countries that want stability, and they've been freely roaming Europe and the US and completely been sponsored by Qatar in these places, and they're buying their way out to silence because they saw that it's much, much easier to morally bankrupt and infiltrate the West. And they're right about that. You know, it's very, very easy to attack students, to attack, you know, very liberal, open-minded people that have no desire and holding to an identity of their country, of their religion. They see it as bad things. What do you mean you're proud of your country? It's a bad thing. Now, countries like that are easy targets, and they've been targeted by these radical Islam, and that's why you're seeing, you know, many, many Arabs standing and telling, listen, guys, the Muslims who ran away to Europe, most of them are literally the garbage of our society. They would never be allowed to say the things that they're saying in our society because it's racist. But in your society, you're protecting them. And if anyone calls them out, you call them an Islamophobe. So, truth be told, if the West doesn't wake up, the West is screwed big time.